Hey team, welcome to episode 134 of Transition Talk, where we talk about dental transitions and how to navigate the sometimes messy path to practice ownership. As an owner, you've devoted years, maybe decades, to building your practice, your life's work. And if you're getting ready to sell, you may be waiting for, or maybe you've already received, your price or evaluation. But what if the price came in lower than expected? What if it's not worth what you thought it was or know it is? It can be an emotional process to see that number, and it may catch you off guard. So in this episode, we are going to help you navigate the situation, discuss your options for when this unexpected circumstance happens. But first, Mr. Loretto.
Hello, Miss Ratcliffe. But wait, my practice is worth millions of dollars. It's a unicorn.
Special.
It's very, very unique. You just have to see it. My patient base for all fee-for-service, they know me. It's worth a lot of money.
If you can't see me, I'm smiling. But yes, I know. We're going to get into it. What's going on in your life?
Well, I just came back from a lengthy vacation, i.e. that was not a vacation. It was a family trip. I'll tell you more about that. So I love my family. It's just I love vacations with Roxanne and I and friends. So what's happening in your world? You got some personal family vacays coming up? What's in your...
So we are taking the kids. So we have the lake house. So we don't go on many summer vacations, but we promised a small vacation. So we're going on a 4-day trip to Mexico at the end of July. So in a few weeks. And we've agreed to let the kids take a friend this time. So it's the first time we're letting them take a friend, primarily my older daughter. So I had to talk a family into letting me take their 9-year-old to another country, which is kind of hard. I was like, man, you trust me a lot. So I like it when it's just us 4 because then we can like actually interact. We don't have like day-to-day life. Like the girls get along and we talk a lot more and there's just nothing to do but hang out together. I'm nervous because I know exactly what's going to happen. Lila and her friend will just be worried about the UV index and on their phone, and they're just going to be tanning and on their phone. And my 9-year-old will have a great time. Like we picked a place that has a good kids club and they're going to be playing.
Yep.
And my Chris will probably love it because he won't have to do all the dad pool play stuff. And so I'm trying to think positive. It's just going to be me and Chris are going to be able to watch them and read and just relax, but it'll be interesting. So 4 days. It's like Thursday through a Sunday. So it's a short stint.
Cabo?
No, we're actually going to Puerto Vallarta.
Okay.
Because I think my kids love the going in the ocean, finding the seashells, authentic, get their hair braided on the...
Yep.
They love that. And the kids club is better at that one. So.
And no seaweed like we're having in Cancun.
And no seaweed. Yeah, I didn't even know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. Don't go to Cancun right now.
Where did you go? What was your trip?
Well, I did a family trip. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so you have just entered into the phase. You didn't know this. I have 4 children, and now when I go on these family trips, not just the 4 people,
you have to pay for the 8?
I have to pay for the 8. And I even had a bonus one come around this time around. So there was 9.
Oh, wow. That's special.
Plus the mother-in-law. So yeah, these trips become very expensive. And now I made the mistake of renting the lake house this time around. So went down to Austin and had the lake house. I'm like, oh, this looks amazing. The pickleball court and the boat and all the stuff. It's going to be amazing. I freaking cooked and cleaned.
Yeah, it's work.
That's all I do.
It's work.
You get up, you make what time's breakfast at? And then they hear the blender. Oh, we're making pina coladas. We're making margaritas. Oh, take another picture. Bring it down to the pool. I'm like, I told Roxanne, this is ridiculous.
It's like work, yeah.
I'm waiting on them.
Yeah.
I know. I don't want to do this again. That was a one and done.
Yeah, you got to tell them next time, like they're adults now. And so if they want to come, they either have to contribute financially or each of them have to pick a night and a day that they're responsible for food and dinner. That's what you got to do. I mean, I tell Lila that. Just kidding.
It's so cute. You think this is how it's going to work? It's so cute.
At the lake house, that's already how it has to work. So I'm a little prepped for it, Okay, but let's get into this. This value conversation is something I think we both run into every single day. It is a sensitive conversation. Price is not something like we like to talk about, like valuing something that someone has like blood, sweat, tears built from the ground up is really hard conversation. There's clearly a lot more to a sale or a partnership than the price, but it's clearly the first thing people think about. And it is the number one thing that they're worried about. And for a lot of people, it's the final kind of peg in their retirement amount, and they have to figure out how to financially make this work, especially if they plan to work or exist for a long term beyond a sale. So clearly, if you're listening, this is focused towards sellers. So if you're a buyer listening, I think it's always important to hear the other side of the coin, to understand how a seller's perspective may be. But this is really geared towards sellers. So we're not really talking about buyer and the value not being what you think it will be. We can do a whole nother episode on that. And we've talked about that a lot, but this is for sellers. So if you're listening, right, if a seller's listening, Charles, What should they do? Or what is the initial emotion that comes out when the value is not right? Like, why do you think that emotion comes into play, or why do you think it's unexpected? Like, set the stage for me.
So it's all in the setup. And the best analogy that I can tell you is a real estate agent. Is you're listing your home, and it could be your family home, 10, 15, 20 years. You think about all the things you put into your home, and you're just looking on Zillow and seeing what other houses, are selling for, and you just think yours is special. And so you're telling the agent what the price needs to be. It's the role of the agent to tell you it's not worth that.
Yeah.
And the same is the setup with a dental practice, is having someone set that expectation. And we just don't walk into a house and say, hey, we think it's worth this, like an agent might based on comps, but you have to look at so many other pieces of this puzzle to look to see the collections and overhead, what trends we're seeing, what finish out, what overhead. And so we'll get into a lot of those pieces that kind of drive that price up and down, here later in the episode. But it's all about expectations that have to be set. And so the reason that sellers are let down, it's because the expectations weren't set realistically up front.
Yeah, or they did no research. They had no education. They listened to a couple articles or podcasts. They're thinking about what the, this DSO PE market's getting. They're hearing EBITDA and multiples. So they're just like, hey, I'm going to sell my practice, and I've heard somewhere one time, and that's what stuck, that my practice should sell it in a private market at 120% of collections or 100% of collections of my last year collections. Not really understanding, right? Like the varied price scale that is, what are you doing after? What's the state of your patient base? What does your office look like? Where is your practice? Who is your buyer, right? There's so many components that go into that. And so I think that the sellers that we have that come to the table, and I'm always so grateful for them, that say, yeah, I just want a reasonable price, and I understand that it's not this, and I hope it's not this, and I hope it falls somewhere in the middle, but I'm willing to be reasonable. I don't want to leave any money on the table, but I also understand that how big my table is. I understand
what's there. Can we
just
stop and pray just that we get more people like that, please?
Yeah, let's do it. Amen.
No, I can think of a gentleman, and I love him to death. A sweet, sweet gentleman, but he was just insistent on telling me how of a unicorn practice this is, and it's this market, outside of Atlanta. It's very desirable, and his patients and this and that. And he was like, all these practices sell for 100% of collections, and his buddies sold for 100% of collections. And, I'm like, whatever. Johnny, it's not. And you don't have a unicorn. And I get that you love this practice, but your overhead is out of control. And it just didn't make sense. I said, nobody is going to pay this. And he insisted that we list it at this higher price. Where the setup came is, we're going to list it at that price, and we will find you buyers. But I'm telling you now, you will be disappointed when those offers come in. And I want you to know, I told you so. Here's what we're going to put in writing. And if you're looking for a timing, this is going to close pretty quick. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I know that you know who. This is a secret little... And it's like two parents talking about the kid in front of the kid. And they're like, what are we talking about? Yeah, we know. We have all these stories between us, don't we?
Yeah, we sure do. And I know that, I think your real estate agent example is completely accurate. I think there are brokers out there. I mean, if you've listened, I think broker is a bad word. There are brokers out there that just want the sale, right? And they will push for the sale, and they will tell you what you want to hear in order to get the listing and to get the sale. Mm-hmm. And then they will push and sell. But oftentimes, there's another person on the other side of the table. There's a lender. There's lender's advisors. And so I think it's a bad business if you don't set the expectation with your client and really do your homework before you'll commit to a price too, right? Yeah. We will not tell you, well, we might give you a ballpark, right? I can look at your financials, but I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to list it for until I do my homework, until I dive in, until I understand what's under the hood, because I'm doing a disservice to you. And honestly, it makes my job a heck of a lot harder down the road if I have to backtrack what I've told you can get for your practice. Sure, you can get 100%, sign the engagement letter, and then now I'm telling you can only get 70%. That creates a distrust and an emotional component from the start, because you will remember that 100%. So 100% that. Do you think this happens more? Well, one, I guess we should both answer this. How often do you think sellers step established dogs are unhappy with the price that they get or value.
I mean, it's a low number when we're working with them specifically. I think that it's very, very common, I think, from the buyers that we work with, because we're analyzing the practice with the objective eyes and saying, hey, that $1 million price tag doesn't make sense. So then that's why our buyer now is disappointed because the seller's disappointed, right? Yeah. So I would say more common, than not, I don't know, 60, 70% of the time that the seller's getting that offer less than what they were expecting. It's not common at all when we're working with the seller because I set that tone.
See, and it's funny because I think you're right. In my opinion, and this I've never done a poll, I think that every seller who gets a price or value is slightly disappointed.
Yeah.
Right? They may not vocalize it. They may not say hey, I'm mad about this price. But I think all of them think it would be a little bit higher, but they don't get upset because they're educated and they expected it, right? And so I think that there's always that concept of I feel like I should get more. And then there's the opposite of buyers. I think it should be less. And it's finding that middle ground of what is the real compromise from a price perspective.
Put it this way, if you ask me differently, what % of the seller is happy with the offer they get? I would say 0. And what I mean by that, because it's not just, it's dude, they just offered you full price. What are you complaining about? Oh, I want to be worked back for 40% now. And they come up with all these other terms. Mm-hmm. I'm are you trying to wreck the deal?
Yeah.
You just got a full price offer.
Well, and I think too, sellers, oftentimes there's more than one thing that's driving them to want to sell the practice, right? And we focus in on price. And I think what I've had to do often when this happens, right? When someone has a price and they're unhappy or they get an offer and they're not unhappy, it's basically saying, look, this is in your court. This is your practice. You can make whatever decision you want. You've also told me that you want this to happen in 6 months. You've also told me that you have this other thing and you're tired or you're overworked. So we can solve for this, but remember this on this side because that's what you were focused on originally. And putting that back into focus sometimes helps that price reaction kind of mute a little bit, right? Because then we're focused on the thing that spending more time with your grandkids, moving across the country, getting out of orthodontics, I'm burnt out. Great. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then let's not get hung up on price and let's not haggle over the $100,000. I think it should be 1.8 and you're saying 1.7. Okay, great. Perfect. Let's move on, So I think that's really important. And then I think also from a reaction standpoint, I find that I can identify the emotional reaction, even if it's not an emotional reaction, oftentimes in valuation, because they'll try to pinpoint something that's super technical. Well, can you explain the small equity risk premium to me and why you use this number? And I'm you really are just trying to find something that will fluctuate the number, or they'll, like you said, they'll focus on something else and you can just tell that they're unhappy and they're not as energized about the deal. And you kind of have to they're not going to tell you they're unhappy about the price, but you kind of have to figure it out and be what do you want? What would make this deal the best deal for you? And then figure out how you get there or how you educate them or how you do something else to make that not a deal and let's go here. And maybe we can tweak your work back or maybe we can tweak your lease, those types of things. So I think it's definitely, there's a lot of different ways people react. It's not always the anger-filled issue.
You have a tough job.
It's super fun. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Super fun.
You have a tough job. I'm always the happy guy on the front end and, hey, how's it going? Let's sell your practice and let's get you in. You have to deal on the grind.
Wrangling cats.
Yeah.
Or lions sometimes. Okay, so why does this happen, right? Let's assume expectations, right? Expectations are one thing, right? And we've talked a lot about that and being educated. But how does it happen? How does someone have the expectation that their practice is going to be worth 100%? Or let's not go crazy. Let's assume they think it's worth 80% and it's worth 60%.
Right.
What causes that variance? In your opinion, what's the biggest driver there?
Well,
we know the biggest driver, but
it's their friends. It's what they heard. It's, hey, my $1 billion practice buddy sold for $800,000 and you're telling me it's only worth $600, or my buddy sold for $900 and you're telling me it's worth $800. Whatever that number is, they're expecting something because of their colleague in that community has shared something with them. It could have been they heard something, read something, a private equity blog about valuations. There is something that they perceive and what they have heard that is causing this in their direct market. So it's just something that they've heard.
Yeah. And then what happens is their buddy sold for 90% and theirs is 60%, but their buddy had a 45% overhead. They had everything new. It was a partnership and they have a 60% overhead or 65% overhead, 70% overhead. They've got, older equipment. They are looking for no transition. Their practice is declining. So I think that we can kind of go into some of those things, but I think that is the biggest misconception is there's the education about expectations in the market, but then there's the uneducated view of what your actual practice is comparatively, right? Not understanding that like if your buddy could have gotten 90%, but that doesn't mean that you get 90. You have to look at your practice and how is your practice different? Because they're not sharing financials. Like they don't know what their buddy's overhead is and like collections.
No, I mean, look, if you're a seller and you've got this amazing business and it's some general practice with a 52% overhead, it's just printing money. It's a big hygiene-driven practice. Lots of new patients, 6-7 chairs for the $1 million, plenty of room for space and a runway for buyers or the associates that are coming in. 2 people can, try to turn this practice to a different level. It's beautiful finish out equipment. It's got this unbelievable opportunity. They're looking inside the charts. There's dentistry that can be done. You've got maybe some recent higher production months. Maybe an associate just joined the practice and they started doing some different procedures, and basically it's like a stock that's rising. Man, oh man, I'm willing to overpay for that. And I'm going to set expectations with that seller to say, hey, even though your buddy down the street, the market conditions are saying 80% on the million, I think you might be that unicorn that we may have to go to market with at 90%. Oh, really? Why do you think that? Well, exactly what I just got through telling you. But based on your practice being this unicorn, I think it could be worth more. Mm-hmm. I think that it may make sense to wait a little bit. Let's allow some of this growth. Let's allow maybe a different kind of 12-month rolling average to have some time to kind of sit in, because I see the thing going amazingly up. And so on the reverse side, when we're working with a buyer and that seller doesn't get that type of analysis with their broker and perhaps it's undervalued, and maybe at the 70%, we're looking at it from the buyer's perspective, maybe at 90% in this example. The idea with that buyer is don't do anything other than just close the deal because it's an amazing opportunity, right? So there's certainly those aspects to it. And then there's that conversation. And for the very unique type of practices where maybe a GP practice is doing $2 million at 50% overhead, or maybe a specialty practice with a low overhead. And that's where those conversations with sellers start getting into what's my private equity value, which is a completely, separate conversation.
Yeah. And I think, 100%, completely different. And I think that's where it gets confusing, right? And so I think that like the majority of clients we work with aren't that practice, right? Like they're the practice that has the 60, 65, 70% overhead when they're looking to sell and walk away. And so I think then like we do a lot of this on the front end of going in and looking at their practice, and even before they've engaged, and being able to say, okay, here's where you are. Why am I not at the 90? Or talk to me about this multiple thing I'm hearing. Okay, that's not you. You know why it's also not you? You're not willing to work back. Like there's a whole slew of things, and we're going to have a whole separate episode on the private equity space and private versus private equity there, because I think that there are value expectations in that world that are very different and are driven by different factors. But if we stay in the private practice space, I think the overhead is the primary driver of 100%. Why your value may differ from expectations. Like if you were just kind of like stable practice, kind of, you're not in the big growth curve or anything, because that can create some other problems. But overhead is your primary driver of value. And that's the main difference in valuations from practice to practice, is all being equal.
And one of the things as a seller, I would challenge you is you need to know what your overhead is. You should be able to, with confidence, say, hey, Charles, I've got $1.3 million practice. I've got a 57% overhead. And what I mean by that, I've taken out interest depreciation, all the benefits of my pension plan. I've taken out, the auto, the travel, my kids on the payroll. And so I know exactly what my profit is. I know what my EBITDA is. I know that my practice makes sense or doesn't make sense on a private equity sale. I know what the valuation, what that would look like. You need to be in that space. Mm-hmm. If you're not in that space, you just kind of like, I don't know what overhead is. It's fine. It's just...
It creates the misalignment with expectations if you don't know that.
That's so well put. It's the misalignment. Just you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's where, our value add is to being able to look at that and say, well, maybe it makes sense that we work on some of those things to maybe improve upon you being better educated, so from a timing perspective. So.
Yeah. And we're going to get into some of those reasons here in a minute. Another thing that I find happens, and sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's unintentional, practices that are going through a big growth pattern, right? And I'm not talking about 1 year, right? Like don't be the practice that goes and pushes hard and works every day of the week for 1 year and then expects to get get the value out of that 1 year. If it's not real and like historically you've never hit that, and like maybe it is real, but oftentimes it comes across as like, I just tried to push as hard as I could to like maximize value. Remember, in the private practice world, we're looking at 2 to 3 years, right? So when I talk about growth curves, I'm not talking about that practice. I'm talking about the practice that is just, you can see the trajectory, you can see that it's kind of growing. So oftentimes in ortho, we'll see this where production is just sky high, right? And collections just have not caught up yet. This can happen if you have expansion of your building, you've opened a bunch of new ops, and so now you're growing. As a owner who is going through that growth curve, or who has just had that big expansion, my expectation of what I'm getting is going to be well higher than probably what it will value at, because I know, one, the opportunity that I'm stepping into, and two, the investment that I've likely made in order to get there. And so what we find is these practices come to the table, or these doctors come to the table, and when we tell them, here's what your private practice valuation, here's what your valuation is for your new partner coming in, we're looking here in historic, but they're like, but we just did a $500,000 expansion. We've got X number of production. Yeah, but that's future, right? Like we can't put a value on that. Now, there are times when someone might be willing to pay for that, but like the number on the paper that you get when you go get a private practice valuation is not going to, it should not represent that future growth. And so I think that's hard for doctors to process and like get over, that they've made this big investment and it's not showing up on the paper yet.
No, I had an unbelievable call with a young man. I mean, he was probably 40, up in the Northeast. He took over his dad's practice just 3 years ago, and it was doing $1 million. They did 400 last month.
Oh, wow.
GP.
Yeah.
And just him and his dad. So marketing changed. He hired a consultant, helped him with vision. They made expansion changes. He did a lot of clinical training. He's doing all on fours now. But yeah, he is absolutely just cranking it. And so to think about what he paid for that practice from his dad, maybe $800,000, and today, yeah, just last year he did like I think 3.2. But once you start hitting $400,000 a month, like you're running a $5 million business at this point, because you don't hit those types of numbers and all of a sudden go back to 200,000 collections a month. So this guy's on an unbelievable path, and he's like, I need an associate because of dad, this and that. I'm like, I kind of keep pushing this thing, and certainly let's grow it until you can't physically do anymore. And then we bring somebody in, and then we work with them, and then who knows what that valuation is going to be. But a guy like that, we're waiting.
Yeah.
This guy was spending like $100,000 for consulting to get his practice where it is. And, I told him it was amazing. I think it's a good deal.
Yeah.
You spend $100,000 and you go from $1 million to $5 million, I keep paying that $100,000. $400,000 in renovations and adding 2 ops. Yep, that's a good decision for me based on what you're doing there. So allowing that runway, allowing that growth, to happen to get the full valuation. And I agree, you certainly look at those last couple of years, 2-3 years, but it is weighted a lot on that last year. So
yeah, of course.
We want to keep that hammer down and not, like you said, just go to 5 days and then plan on cutting back to 3 days after the sale or something.
Yeah, not going to work. Yeah, I mean, I always tell sellers in every arena, every transition arena, right? Like we want stable, slowly kind of growth. I mean, like no one wants to see either the growth that is like, is this sustainable or not? Or was this just one? And clearly no one wants to see a decline, right? So being able to go into a transition phase, or if you're thinking about a transition, what can I reasonably continue to achieve, right? And if I'm already maxed out and like adding another person will help, what kind of sale am I looking at? Is this a partnership? Is it a private equity? Is it, am I walking away? Like don't build something that's bigger than you can maintain depending on the type of sale you're looking at, because someone who buys into your practice that was doing, $2 million and you're really only tapped out at 1.5 is going to expect the $2 million practice continue. They're going to expect it to grow beyond that. And if you can't, then you kind of sold a false good, So I think that's really important. So you kind of went into this, so I want to kind of shift there. If you get a bad valuation, quote, or one that doesn't meet your mark, right? Like you have some options, right? You mentioned one, wait and sell, and we'll talk about that. Another option is just to accept it, right? Which is the harder one, but sometimes the only option for people. So I want to talk about both of those. So let's talk about waiting first, which you mentioned, and I guess we can talk about the growth option too. When I do evaluation for a practice, and this happens often, this happened a lot of times post-COVID, a practice that, in 21, 22 had a ton of growth, they started investing in their space, they did a big expansion, and they want to bring a partner in because the associate's been there, it's time to bring the partner in. They get evaluation and they're like, it's not enough. And I'm like, I hear you. Like your option is to wait. Wait it out, give it 6 or 9 more months for that profitability to actually continue to flow through and build up to that new space, and then we'll do a new evaluation. Right? Like that is the easiest answer. It's not always the most realistic answer, but the easiest answer, if you're not happy and you have the runway, is weight.
Well, there's one thing I want to add there. You got to fix things, though. That could be the fix things as in we growing the practice. It could be the fix things in looking at your overall team costs, having
from an overhead perspective.
Having drivers, from assistant front desk and hygiene columns, having percentages, having goals set for there, really diving into your overall lab and supply. Those are your main drivers that you can focus on. I think so many times that we get to see on the NDP side and certainly the Clean Waters front, and I do this a lot in lecture, is people, they just can't look at numbers naturally and just see what the strategy is, right? When you show somebody that they have this $1 million practice and 70% overhead, you have to give them hope. The hope is, okay, how do we do more on the top line? And to show them how fixed and direct costs work, and to show them these are the things we can change, and here's our profit margin if we do 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, whatever it may be. This is the hope, and this is where that margin, starts to get in. But key to the management of the overhead is it starts with good, clean, dental-specific financial statements. I think that Clean Waters financial statements are the best in the business, and we have accounting and tax services for those that are looking for just that level of help there. And a little shameless plug there for Clean Waters, but it's like you need to have clean financial statements to really hone this business, to see the profitability so that we know what our business is worth. It starts there.
Yeah. And I think if you get a valuation and it's not what you want, clearly looking at overhead is the first way to go. And I think, let's say you come to me and you're like, hey, I could sell now or I could wait and I probably have a couple more years in me. Okay, great. Now you have 2 years, right? Fixing your overhead helps your value, but you know what it does more? It puts more money in your pocket over those 2 years. And there are oftentimes easy ways to tweak overhead. Now, if it's your team cost, that's not an easy one to tweak down, right? That's harder. But oftentimes our clients, especially on the NDP front, haven't looked at their financials in a while. They've kind of gotten comfortable with whatever money's going in their pocket. So they haven't taken a hard look at merchant services or their dental supply costs or the lab they use or, all kinds of small incremental changes that add up to 5 to 7% overhead. Even if you don't do $1 more, you've got 5 to 7% more coming in your pocket over that time that you continue to own. So I think it depends on the runway you have, what changes you can make and where you are in your trajectory. If you're younger and you're thinking about bringing a partner, then clearly growing the practice and figuring out conversion and patient acquisition, all of those things can kind of help. But if you're listening and your runway is not so big and you don't want to do more, then figure out how we tweak that overhead so that we can put more money in our pocket and maybe improve that valuation, because 5 to 7% overhead change makes a big valuation impact. And then just clearly cash flow, which is the most important part for you, How does someone go about looking at those overhead and if they're looking at their financials as they are and they know that they're overspending on some things, what are some things they can do to adjust those?
Yeah, so make sure if you got a team cost, we're looking from a GP example, we're looking for around a 25% goal there. Now, certainly know what hygiene is doing around the country, especially on the West Coast where you've got, $80 an hour hygienists that are absolutely just crazy compared to what they were just, a few years ago. So you have to make hard decisions there. We have to grow top line to balance out that team. So the examples, if your team cost is at 32, 35%, it should be 25, 26. You simply have to just grow the practice with the same level of team, period. And then we want clean financial statements where dental supplies are dental supplies only. I don't want hand pieces in there, no aligner cases in there. I don't want any of the Shiner, Patterson, or Benco softwares in there. I want just dental supplies. We should get those at 5%. Lab should be, depending if we have CAD CAM or not, somewhere between a 4 to 7%. And what we've been able to use as a resource is the platform Elite Dental Alliance, and EDA, as we refer to internally, has already negotiated some of the best, if not the best, pricing in all of dentistry. And so I know many times where that client that we meet with the overhead is not where it needs to be and the expectations of value. We need to A, grow, and need to B, work, simultaneously with their expenses using this platform. And that's going to work. And like you said, if we can create on $1.5 million practice a 4 to 5% change, it's not only going to put the $60,000 to $75,000 more in your pocket that you can use, but it's also going to add to your valuation, probably in the neighborhood of $100,000, $125,000, maybe $150,000 higher in valuation, which now all of a sudden, for a small amount of change and effort, that's something, make more money and higher value. Yes, maybe we should wait a little bit.
Yeah. So waiting to sell it, clearly, if it's running on all cylinders and you just got a lot of growth, you just need to wait some of that growth out. If fixing issues, if you have some problems that you need to resolve, we can do that. The other option is just to accept it. And that's a harder one, but accepting it kind of has a couple of different facets, right? Like if you don't have a runway, if you are just ready to sell, time is valuable too. Right.
I agree.
And so sometimes this is not what I anticipated. Does it work for my financial plan? Yes. Would I have loved to get an extra 100? Great. 1,000 or something? Yeah, sure. But I didn't. And here's now my choice, right? Keep working. Potentially lose a buyer, right? Because I think that's an important component too, right? There's not always a huge buyer pool for every single practice out there. And so if you are in a rural community, your practice kind of has some intricacies and you get a good solid buyer that's interested in your practice, you're not guaranteed to get that if you wait a year. And so I think that's an important component that causes some people to just say, okay, not super happy, but like, this is more important and I'm just going to take it.
Yeah. One last thing as we kind of close on this kind of accept thing is you got to remember, seller, there are a lot of different levers here that we can pull. Yeah. We can maybe, if you're working back, have you work back at a higher percentage, maybe get paid as an independent contractor. Maybe we increase the rent a little bit on the deal where you make a little money on the real estate. We maybe work with you on the allocation for a tax perspective. So there's some levers here that we can basically play with. But in the end, like you said, most of the time these sellers are at a point where they're just ready. They wait forever and then they finally go like, hey, I'm ready. And it's like, yeah, because your wife has already moved into the house in Texas and you live in Georgia and, you're living by yourself. Yeah, I get it. They made some big changes at that point. So there's nothing wrong with that kind of accepting thing. I think that the earlier you can have just realistic conversations with your financial planner, realistic conversations with the person who's going to guide you through the transition and yourself kind of internally, kind of where you are emotionally to let kind of this thing that your life's work over to somebody. It's a lot easier to do it over time than just to do it really quickly. So it's been fun to be a part of so many of these transitions and listen to both the excitement of the seller and the family and even to the buyers. I mean, the buyers are pretty cool to work with when they can take these things over. So
I agree. And you know what? I think these solo podcasts you're doing on your own have helped you. You're wrapping up pretty well. I like it.
Well, it's because you're on vacation all the time.
Okay.
I just got back from Scotland. I just got back from Ireland. And now I'm heading down to Port. Wait, I'm at my lake house. Yeah.
All right, sir.
All righty.
As you guys know, these valuation topics are hard, and valuation and price in general is an emotional component. Highly, highly encourage you, as we always do, to be educated about your practice, be educated about the market you're listening. And so that's clearly a first step. We do this all the time and you don't, and that's okay, right? I'm not in teeth every day. So encourage you to call us if you're looking at transition, if you're thinking about it, send us some financials. Happy to jump on a quick complimentary call just to walk you through kind of what we're seeing and maybe some opportunities. If there's areas you can do better and you have some runway, then clearly have resources for that as well. Thanks for listening, guys. That's all we have for today, and thanks for joining us on episode 134 of Transition Talk. As always, make sure to share the transition love with those who may not know of us yet, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.